It's quite recently I was in a thread with you where you referred to yourself as a reformed libertarian.
Yeah, I call myself post-libertarian.
Okay.
I think it's a pretty common term. I know I have quite a few friends that would use that label as well. So when I was in my early 20s, I was deep within the libertarian movement in Canada. Most of my friends were libertarian. I was part of a cabal of friends. Some of them went on to work at places like the Institute for Humane Studies and the Cato Institute. And I still have a lot of those connections today. A lot of them are like me. They sort of left libertarianism. Some of them followed interesting paths. There was like this weird in-between movement for the post-libertarians. It was called Bleeding Heart Libertarianism, or like BHL. And it was really, some people called it libertarianism. It was an attempt to reconcile the fact that libertarians, particularly in the Cold War period, really got in bed with conservatives in the United States. And it was sort of this weird shotgun marriage that was, I don't want to say it was forced on people, but it was rationalized due to the threat of communism around the world. And libertarians were really worried about communism, the Soviet Union, Marxist influences, and they saw conservatives as sort of like a natural ally. And this led to this fusionism where libertarians and conservatives got together and created this sort of weird mess that we see today in the United States with libertarianism and conservatism. And I think especially around the 2008 financial crisis, which was really when I was kind of coming of age and I was still enmeshed in the libertarian movement, that was when there was a lot of conversation starting to happen, among many libertarians of like, why are we friends with conservatives again? Like do we really share the same goals here? Conservatives are generally pro-war. They want to lock nonviolent drug offenders up, send them to jail. They're opposed to immigration. Aren't we against war? Aren't we for immigration? Like, do we really believe that these invisible lines drawn on maps should define whether or not somebody can move around freely and engage in free association? So there was this like real, I think, awakening that happened. And I think that that's kind of what led to at least my post-libertarian journey. I wouldn't like, I think I would say today, I'm still in that tradition in the sense that, I believe in the liberal idea. I believe in, I'm a liberal in the classical tradition, and I love that philosophy, and I'm still a big defender of it, and I'm, and I beat that drum. But I think there's something about what we call libertarianism that is often very reductionist and very suspicious, morally and ethically sometimes. And so I point that out, and I am a someone who really wants to highlight those contradictions. Austrian economics, which is often very closely associated with libertarianism, and I once considered myself an Austrian myself, but as I matured and I started to have a more healthy appreciation for the complexity of the world, I started to see that there were serious blind spots in that way of thinking about the economy and money that I don't think fully and truly capture the complexity of these things. I mean, we can get into that. I think it's a really fascinating discussion. I'm happy to go all the way down that rabbit hole and explain in excruciating detail why I think Austrians economists are getting it wrong. But the short and sweet of it is that I don't believe that there is like a true equilibrium to be found in a market, right? I mean, obviously, supply and demand are real. I would never debate that, but like human society is complicated. What makes us happy is complicated. It's hard to quantify. We're always moving. We're always chasing something new. We're running away from some things. And it's just impossible to believe, impossible for me to believe that there's this set of perfect rules that if you follow them, you will achieve this moral maxima and we will get closer to utopia, I guess, if we just do that. And I doubt that very much. And I think Austrians sometimes are a little bit too utopian in the way they believe that if you subscribe to these like very consistent, self-consistent principles, say like in the Rothbardian sense, referring to Murray Rothbard, that what you'll get is something which is closer to the ideals of freedom and liberty. And there's something suspicious there, which is these like there's normative moral claims at the bottom of what they're saying, and they're not really honest about it. I mean, some people are, but there's this argument of natural laws underneath a lot of those claims that are very suspicious. Like, are those the real natural laws? Like, did it really take until the 20th century for some guy named Murray Rothbard to discover that there were these like laws in the universe that were written in the stars that we just like suddenly discovered and like, oh, this is how we should live? Like laissez-faire economics were like and money and all these like actually relatively advanced social concepts were what we truly needed to achieve like our moral and ethical destiny. Like that can't be true. Like humans have been on this planet for, modern humans anyways, have been on this planet for at least 60,000 years. Our close ancestors, another 200,000 years, primates like several million. Like this can't be true. It can't be true. So, I'm really suspicious of that way of thinking about the world.
What do you think the attraction is to people who claim to be or claim that they're libertarians?
I think most young people come to libertarianism for the same reason that a lot of young people come to socialism, and a lot of these sorts of really utopian ideologies, because you're young and you're idealistic and you want to believe that there's easy answers, and there's not. There's no easy answers.
I kind of tend to, whenever I sit down with a libertarian, discuss their ideas, I always tend to agree with what they're saying. I think morally they're usually pretty right.
Yeah.
It's when I start to run through the thought experiments of how you coordinate a society of tens of millions or hundreds of millions of people and how that may play out, that's when I start to have questions and start to struggle. I a while back interviewed Scott Horton, and he'd written an article where he said he doesn't believe in the big red button to get rid of government. He doesn't. But what I would worry about is that humans will always coordinate, and if you were to remove the state, something else would replace it that could be worse. And you're a fan of modern liberal.
What is the state? Define the state for me.
I mean,
tell me what the state is.
The state to me is a set of borders that defines a country, and within that there is a group of people who are elected to run it, or maybe not even elected to run it.
So let's like play a little game here, right? Yeah. Like I want to, like let's steel man, like a purely voluntarist society from the ground up. Let's just do the whole thought experiment today, and then see if we can use purely anarcho-capitalist rules. We'll stick to the non-aggression principle, contractualism, voluntarism. We'll try to work our way up and see where we get here. So,
but you've already hit one of my first difficult points, is that everyone has to adhere to the non-aggression principle, and humans won't.
Let's give them credit. Let's suspend disbelief, and then try to see if we can, if these ideals can survive. Like, so I'm Bob. So Bob comes along, and Bob sees there's this really, really beautiful island that he wants to buy. I don't know, maybe it's like 1,000 square miles of island. So he let's just assume for the sake of argument that the island is properly owned. I understand that the proper way in which to obtain the morally pure initial conditions to own land is through homesteading, and so the island was properly homesteaded, and the successor owners were all properly transferred the rights to the island. There's no issues of the island being stolen, or there's no war or anything like that happened. And so Bob is engages in a clean purchase of the island. He owns it outright. It's completely free and open transaction. Bob moves on to the island and decides, you know what, I think it's really boring to live here by myself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide my island up into parcels. I'm going to build roads. I'm going to do all this, all the things to attract people to come here and build houses and businesses. And I want to have, Bob's Island, which is going to be the best island to come and do business and raise your family. And in exchange for everyone coming, they have to sign a contract or, some sort of, a 200-year lease to own the land. You agree in this contract that if you come and live on the island, you have to follow Bob's rules. And you sign a contract that Bob is the owner of the island. And so even though you're living here, you have to agree to do what Bob says. And so, Bob is essentially the CEO of the island. And so Bob's really successful. Hundreds of thousands of people move to the island. Big companies come and set up shop. Skyscrapers get built. It's this like business paradise. People are loving living on Bob's island. Years and years go by. Bob dies. He leaves the island to his son. His son is like completely crazy, like Mad King type thing. Starts getting into like arguments with some of the big business leaders on the island, and people start getting into conflicts. But as the years go by, the island starts to turn more and more into something that looks like a totalitarian state for all intents and purposes. One day, like one of the families, their 7-year-old kid, like trespasses in the wrong place, smashes a window, and Bob's son, let's call him Peter, tells them the kid they have to remove the kid from the island. I'm like, we have nowhere to go. We have 2 hours to get off my property, or I'm going to go throw you in the ocean, and you can go swim to another shore. And if you take anarcho-capitalism, its principles seriously, nothing unlibertarian is happening. Somebody's just enforcing their property rights. The parents signed a contract. That contract is like, and so are we going to say this isn't a state? What has happened here? We haven't formed a state. This is the regression problem that I see in this anarcho-capitalist argument. So are we going to say that's not, and actually a lot of them will argue it's not a state because, following all these principles, we got to this place by contractualism, voluntarism, non-aggression principle, which now actually defends Peter's island's inheritance. So technically, if he doesn't leave, they're the aggressors. And he's then, of course, under the non-aggression principle, is able to use violence against the 7-year-old to remove him because he's trespassing. So like this is like an example of like why I don't think this ideology is very well thought out. And this is why I asked you at the very beginning there to tell me what a state is. How is that not a state?
But I think it is a state of sorts.
Yeah. But I didn't violate any anarcho-capitalist principle all the way up into the end.
How would you have defended that 20 years ago, or whenever it was you were a libertarian?
I probably would have said, I don't think it's likely to happen. I think I would have probably made some special pleading arguments saying, I think in that world, there'll be competition between jurisdictions. And so people can always leave, and there'll be the incentives of business will never be towards like doing that sort of thing. And I think as I got older and started to really think about human nature and seeing how humans can actually quite regularly act against their own self-interest, they and can be quite malevolent and kind of sociopathic. I came to no longer believe that market forces could not be relied upon to prevent those sorts of outcomes from happening.